This video is proudly sponsored by NewType. Tools, accessories, model kits, these guys have it. Hop over to newtypehq.com and use the link below to help this channel out for future builds. "7,000 metric tons, 15 computer systems augmented with binaural circuitry, top cruising speed warp 9.975. Join me on this momentous occasion of celebrating Star Trek Voyager's 30th anniversary of building probably the most demanded starship build onto his YouTube channel, the REVELL 1/670 scale Star Trek Voyager. Hello and welcome back, my dudes and dudettes. Another exciting build from your boy Otaku Builder. And if this is your very first time onto this YouTube channel, welcome. So it's been a while. I mean, a long while since I've made any consistent videos on this YouTube channel. And I'm super sorry for that, guys. It's just work, family, and then dealing with an actual natural disaster on the side. I'll get into that later on in the video. But first and foremost, I need to work on this project because it has literally been sitting in my backlog for close to 4 years. And I want to celebrate two momentous occasions. One, for my good boy Kenny White, and also celebrating the 30th anniversary for Star Trek Voyager, because this is a show that I had zero interest in back when I was in college. But fast forward a couple years later, I have actually learned to love this design of Voyager. And as you can see here from the box art from REVELL, this is going to be a very challenging kit because we are at level 4, which means this is probably one of the most difficult parts of this model kit that's in their lineup. That means it requires glue, paint, a little sanding here and there, and a lot of patience, and I mean a lot. Now, as with the box art, it's pretty standard what you expect from REVELL, but all that changes when you look in the back, and this is where it's really nice. Now, this representation of what you expect when the model kit looks like when it's fully painted, it's kind of misleading, but it gives you a nice understanding on what you would expect when this model kit's fully painted. It's absolutely gorgeous. But for those who are a little hesitant on what you're going to need to do when you get this guy out of the box, they give you a nice little simple layout on what you expect for colors to build when you guys get this out and ready to go. And also, if you get the chance to buy the models and paints at the model shop, you can get it right then and there. But all that goes out the window when you pull this bad boy out, and this guy is massive. Now, allow me to give you a size comparison. On my right is the round 2 USS Voyager model kit. Now, this kit came over like around 4 or 5 years ago compared to the one that I'll be building today. As you can see here, there is a substantial amount of detail that isn't on the big one. So that's because of the fact this model kit literally came out 10 years ago prior to this one. So anything that's modern and new, it's finally up to date. Now, as for the build quality on this model kit, it's pretty straightforward. There are some noticeable molding plastic pieces here and there, but besides that point, it is a beautifully clean printed mold. Great deal of surface detail, tons of free mobility when it comes to doing any kind of lighting in there, and also when it comes to light drilling. And then on top of that, the detail itself is just beautiful. I just love it. And I wasn't, like I said, wasn't a big fan of it, but after I built the Sovereign class USS Enterprise E, I knew I needed to really delve into the world of building different unique starships. Now let's talk briefly about what we expect from this model kit. We got the decals and the instruction manual, but we're gonna talk about the instruction manuals first. Now, for those who are venturing into building their very first starship, this might look incredibly intimidating. I get it, I was one of those, but thanks to the good folks in REVELL, they got you covered. Now, when it comes to the tools that you'll need, they have a beautiful tutorial on what you're gonna need to make this model kit truly shine. A good pair of tweezers and an X-Acto blade for the hard to reach area to cut those windows, followed by a good pair of tweezers for the water slide decals, and then last and finally, a brush. Now, to paint this model kit, we're gonna end up using an airbrush, but a brush is preferable for those who aren't really comfortable with that particular tool. That is kind of an advanced skill set to really paint something that this is complex, but make sure you got a hefty amount of X-Acto blades to cut those areas. Now, when it comes to paint, these companies do an incredible job of giving you a simplistic understanding on what particular paints you'll need to make this model kit really shine. Now, if finding the actual right paint or something close to those paint aren't your cup of tea, they give you a nice description on doing some color mixing it to hit those areas the way how you would like it, like you would see in the actual studio scale model kit or in the 3D model version. And man, they go hand when it comes to the detail. I mean, incredibly detailed. I know I was struggling at one point when it came to painting the thrusters. I thought they were like between an orange to a light brown. Strangely enough, it's actually like a soft brownish yellow. And thanks to this simplistic color scheme when it comes to actually choosing what needs to work, what can work, what doesn't work, they do a great job of doing it. Even the sensor array has like these nice little finite little details to make it really pop. And I really like that attention to detail because I'm an attention buff when it comes to stuff like this, and I like the fact that they went that extra step to make that easier. I mean, look at this, even down to where you need to actually apply the actual particular color tones, the color shifts, area where you need to apply the water slide decals, decals. These guys really love making model kits, and I love that little attention to detail, and it's great. Now again, this might be incredibly intimidating for anyone for the very first time, but again, these guys got you covered, even down to the part when it comes to assembly. To be frank, this model kit is not that hard. Everything is beautifully described on how you need to do it, building down to the secondary hull, attaching things to the actual saucer section, building up the warp nacelles. This is great. They give you a nice little layout on what you need to paint first before you start to construct everything together. And that part is incredibly crucial for people who want to put in LEDs. Next up, we have some accessories. I believe this is a Type 3 or Type 2 shuttlecraft from the TNG era leading to Deep Space Nine. A nice simplistic action base. My personal gripe, it's a little too low, but that's fine. If you're just doing a straight up build and you want to put this on your shelf and ready to go, you're good. Now let's talk about the water slide decals, and my dudes, there is a lot. Everything down to these little yellow little bits that sit around the top and the bottom of the saucer section. It's awesome. Very welcoming when it comes to putting these little fine little details, because a lot of times you're going to end up using photo etching, which we are going to be using for this particular model kit, thanks to, I believe it's Green Strawberry. And they make top-notch photo etching pieces. I've used it on the Enterprise Refit, the USS Defiant, and even parts on the Enterprise D. So it's safe to say that I'm pretty comfortable when it comes to this product, and I'm almost certain that it will look great on the USS Voyager. So no times like the present, so let's get started building the USS Voy. Okay, so before I get started doing any kind of drilling, any kind of post preparations of putting the LEDs, I need to do a close evaluation on focusing on the areas that definitely need my close attention. Now, from first glance, there doesn't seem like there's anything wrong with it. I'm actually pretty happy with the durability of the plastic, but there are some small little imperfections that definitely catch my eye in the very front and the side of the saucer section. Again, it is a very minor little thing, but for me that's really obsessed with detail, it's definitely going to prove to be a problem when you start applying the paint layers over and over, and those little imperfection surfaces will become a problem later on. So I'm going to go in with a heavy on the sandpaper and then go into light to buff those areas out, so that way when I get everything prepared to put on the primer, we should be good to go. Okay, so now that we got those pesky imperfections done, now it's time to use my Gundam marker to mark out the windows that I will be personally hand drilling to get them prepared to put in some resin clear to make them light up with the LEDs. Now this process is relatively simple. I'm just gonna go a little bit random here and there to make sure everything looks nice and consistent, but at the same time, get some randomness to it because I don't want the whole entire saucer section to light up. So now that part is done, it's now time to get started on the next exciting part in this build, and that is drilling out the windows. Now in the past I did end up using a hand Dremel, but over time I noticed that it caused a great deal of fatigue and muscle achiness around my wrist. I am getting a little bit older, so I gotta be very delicate on what I'm doing with my stuff. So I had that bright idea of getting like a spring-loaded Dremel. Now I have used this in the past on the Enterprise E, and this was a absolute blast of a tool to use, but the distance and the range and back and forth motion, it's a bit too much once again on my wrist. I needed something that was smaller, more simplistic, and that's when I came across the Zonot tool. Now this is very similar to the one that I was using previously on the Enterprise E, but man, if you look at it, it's very simplistic, very lightweight, and it definitely cuts down the range of motion that I would definitely need to reduce since I need to cut down on my string on my wrist. And I love the fact that the spring-loaded feature is very clean, is very consistent, and above all else, it's very easy to use. So for this part, I'll be using a small Dremel to start off with the smaller windows, and then for the bigger ones, I'll follow it up with a power Dremel later on in this build. Okay, so the windows come out just the way how I imagined, but there is some room of improvement. So that's when an X-Acto blade will come into play to clean out all that unnecessary excess plastic. But to give the windows a little bit more of a proper shape, a little bit more proper depth and feel, that's when the power Dremel comes into play. Now, the actual drill bit I'm using, it's relatively small and it's incredibly sensitive, especially when I'm using a Dremel that has some serious weight distribution due to the batteries in the back and the motors in the front. So for me, I've been using this for years, so I kind of have a good flow to it because it's muscle memory by this time. But for you, I would recommend going for something a little bit smaller. Now, as you can see here from this demo, I am doing in a 3 burst motion. Now, what exactly do I mean? When you use a Dremel at a really high RPMs, it will gradually over time melt the plastic, and that's something you don't want to do. And that's something most certainly I don't want to do in this build. So I do a 1 to 2 bursts, take it out, clean up the actual excess plastic that builds up on the Dremel, and then rinse and repeat. Doing this motion itself keeps it really consistent, plus you get clean cutouts.
Just wait and see. How do you think I'm sweet? I'm sweet, so sweet. Take kissing up, sick or hot. I'm not so good at 거야. How do you think I'm sweet? I'm sweet, so sweet.
So after spending 2 to 3 hours on drilling out the designated windows, it's now time to take a step back and evaluate how much work we really put into this, and this is looking absolutely stellar. Now it's time to select the areas that are going to be required, the navigation lights, which are going to be in the back of the secondary hull, 2 parts around the top and bottom sections of the sausage section, as well as 1 in the very back of the work nacelles. Okay, so in this part it might seem a bit strange, but Green Strawberry recommends you cut out these areas so you can install their photo etchings in back of the plastic. I would say don't go this route. Putting the photo etching on front of these areas is just fine. Doing this method just causes nothing but headaches. We finally reached the realm of photo etching pieces. Now this process is relatively simple. Use a very sharp X-Acto blade, don't use a pair of snippers, and use a very strong super glue to apply onto the surface to get an added detail. But there was one particular detail that definitely stood out. Now on this molding, there were certain window sections that are surprisingly missing on this mold. Now other future iterations of this definitely fix it, but this one is definitely missing. So what I'm doing is using the photo etching pieces here as a template, marking the windows that I want to actually drill out, and then once that's done, take the template off and then drill out with a Dremel to get the windows that I would definitely see if this was done correctly. It's a small little detail, but it's definitely something you should really look out for when you're doing this model kit. Now, in this next step, it is heavily required that you glue these pieces together. So I'm going to be using Bob Smith's extra thick glue to add a generous amount of glue in selected areas. And then once I glue these pieces together, I'll be applying another layer of glue in the inner part of this to make sure it's nice, lock, and stock. Now, once I do that, I'll be applying a glue accelerant to accelerate the process. And then I got to deal with these pesky seam lines. Now, the seam lines can be a problem later on when applying a bright light through it. So I want to try to mitigate that as much as possible. So I'm using Mr. Hobby Cementer to the designated designated areas, and then I'll eventually sand those down so that way I get a nice smooth surface. That's actually looking quite nice. Now it's time to evaluate what I'm gonna need to do next. Now, obviously I've already sanded out some areas that are gonna require a little bit more personal attention, but there are some areas that requires a little bit more, I guess you could say, advanced technique to this. So designated areas, I'm gonna need to actually sand them down with a Dremel, and then I'll be applying the photo etching pieces on top of that surface to get more of that added needed detail. I'm glad all that hard work's starting to pay off. Photo etching pieces are absolutely a blast to work with. So let's talk about the next process on this build, because I know there's been a heavy flow of inconsistency with this video, and I apologize for that. So first and foremost, we got all the photo etching pieces done. We applied all the drilling that needs for the designated windows, and now we need to get started on how we're going to be installing the LEDs for this model kit. Now for the sponsor section, it's going to require a massive array of lighting to make this guy really pop out. Now from the test ones I did right here, it looks totally just fine, but I remember doing the exact same thing with the Enterprise E. When I plugged it in with a proper power source, the windows weren't popping the way how I imagined. I don't know what it had to do with the fact that there was enough light being refracted in there, or there could have been more lighting. Whatever the case, I'm going to fix that. So we're going to be hitting these areas with black primer inside to help reduce any kind of light bleeding through the plastic, and then comes the delicate choice of choosing between certain types of silver. Now I've dabbled with Vallejo's silver. It's great, not bright enough. I dabbled with Tamiya's platinum or Quicksilver or Leaf silver. It's good, but then I thought about, what if I need something that has like a nice mirror-like surface? And that's when Super Chrome AK comes in. Now this bottle, it's very expensive, but the kind of quality work you get from this particular product, hell, if you want to paint the Razor Crest with a Super Chrome like reflective surface, this is the paint to go. And as an added bonus, it's airbrush ready, so you don't have to do any kind of diluting, you're ready to go. So we're going to use it primarily both inside the saucer section, secondary hull, and the warp nacelle. So we're good to go on that front. Now comes the next delicate part in this model kit, and that is actually applying a proper action base. So you notice I made an X here earlier on the video, and that was me mapping out on where I'm going to be putting in a copper rod. Now you're probably telling yourself, Otaku Builder, this action base is just fine. You could be right, but you could be wrong. It's been on the short side, it's a little bit stubby, so to be honest, we don't need it. We need to do something more custom. And thankfully, I had a spare action base lying around from my previous USS Enterprise refit, and this will do it just fine. Now we need to figure out where we're going to be placing the rod. Logically, it would make sense to put it around the mid and the middle portion of the hull. The very front would be ideally too, but it'll get into the way of the LEDs for the main deflector disc. So ideally, we're going to put it around the middle of the part, which is going to create less weight distribution problems. Now when it comes to certain materials, I'm going to be going with a nice copper rod. Now this is ideally for any kind of custom builds. I personally have used this in the past on previous projects, and this is going to go great. Now, when it comes to actually putting this guy in a stationary position, I will explain it later on in the build as we keep going forward. But first, we need to mark out the area where I'm going to be drilling the hole through. So in my drilling, I was a bit inconsistent when it came to actually how wide and how shallow this particular aperture should be, so I have a way to fix that. This is definitely something I would not recommend to do, but if you're in a tight pinch, I would definitely recommend it. So I'm going to be using Tamiya's masking tape. Now this particular masking tape is a little bit more durable, kind of has like almost like, I guess you could say like a plumber tape kind of feel to it, but with the right kind of width and the right kind of consistency to make it fit the way how I want it, this is actually going to actually fill in that hole just quite nice. And at the same time, make it look nice and clean. So at the same time when I'm doing this, I'm actually measuring to make sure it's nice and even, it's up and right straight. So logically you think to yourself, I'm just going to glue into place and I'll be good to go, right? Boy, are you wrong. Over time, that thing will shimmy left and right and it will break and fall apart and you will just be absolutely destroyed. So we're going to need something more heavier. This is when Master Sculpt comes into play. This is like a 2-part cement / 2-part epoxy mixture. And this was something that was recommended by my good friend, JJ Bottles Making. Now this guy is the GOAT and the man to go to for simple questions like this that can be kind of technical for most people, but he's the only one that actually came up to me and told me like, hey, there's this great epoxy resin stuff. It's very easy to work with. It dries in less than 24 to 40 hours and this stuff will last for a very long time. Go with this product. And you know what? JJ was right. Thank you, my dude. This thing worked out like a charm. Okay, so now the installation is complete, it's now time to leave this bad boy alone for the next 48 hours. Now for me, since I work too many hours at work, I'm gonna leave it alone for a week just to play a little safe and come back a couple of days later and Jesus Christ, this thing did not disappoint. This Magic Sculpt hardener is a dream to work with and it absolutely worked. Thank you, JJ, for the recommendation, my dude. This stuff worked amazingly. Now comes the next challenging part. We need to make sure this model kit is shipped ready. So there needs to be a connection point between the base and the model kit, and I need to connect something to there so that way it wouldn't be a problem for my buddy Kenny when he takes it out of the package. So I need to create a connector. So the simple answer to that, I'm going to use a spare piece from my previous cutting, the actual copper rod, and then cut a small little slit down the middle so I can scrunch the rod inward to create a nice little small funnel in there. the adapter is finally done and installed onto the rod, and now it's time to test out the actual rod onto the secondary hull. Now, I deliberately made this adapter slightly more tighter than normal so that way it's a nice tight fit and that creates less wobblage, but I noticed when I applied onto the actual base we still get some wobblage, and that's just due to the fact that the diameter and the shape of the actual rod itself, it's a bit on the thin side. So just apply some Tamiya masking tape to reduce that wobblage, and then when everything sets in there just perfectly, the wobblage is literally gone. It sticks the landing beautifully, so we're good to go and working on stage 2, and that is finally painting this bad boy, so let's get to it. Okay, so before we get started on building the warp nacelles, we need to tackle the next challenging part on the model kit, and that is going to be the ship's deflector dish. Now, this part is completely optional. You don't need to paint and mask each individual line within the deflector dish. This is completely optional, but for me, I am trying my best to get close to that studio scale look, and I think this is the best approach to go for it when you try to get that level of authenticity. Okay, so now this part is done. It's now time to tackle the next challenging part on this build, and that is picking the correct color to paint the deflector dish. Now, history has shown that most people have painted the grill lines of the deflector dish with a nice bright copper color. That goes well for the warp nacelles grills, not the deflector dish. From my research, it has shown it's between a yellow and a yellowish orange brown. Now, the brown I found close to this was Mr. Color 7, and that is probably the most accurate color I can find that will work for this. But I'm going to use a combination between the two to make that look just as much as authentic like you would see from the studio scale. Okay, so after I'm done with this test fit, it's now time to get some form of light diffusion behind this clear piece. So I'll be using Mr. Color 69 and give it a gentle brush of that particular white behind there, so that when I put in the bright blue LED lights behind that piece, it'll create a much even light diffusion. Cool, the deflector dish is done and it's looking absolutely stellar. Now comes the next challenging part in this build, and that's actually painting the warp nacelle grills. Now, like I mentioned earlier in the video, the grills themselves are with a specific color, but that's not the challenging part. Now, the spacing in between each individual line is quite unique. The middle parts are nicely even, which means a 1mm tape will work just fine, but around the outer parts of it, it gets really narrow. So this particular tape is not going to cut it. I'm going to need to use a cutting board to get nice, really thin lines. That way I can properly mask that out, because I've actually done an attempt of actually dry brushing each individual grill, which has failed incredibly. So this method actually works very well. It is time consuming, but a lot of patience and a lot of due diligence, the effect will come out beautifully. So so after spending close to 4 hours trying to painstakingly paint this piece because I made a lot of mistakes, the light diffusion and the grills are finally done. They are donezo. Now we get started at actually painting the actual color for this model kit. Now, the instruction manuals do give you a very understanding example on what color is supposed to be. It's between like a light gray and then certain key areas has like a mid-tone of a mid-gray. Now, once again, if you don't want to do this way, this is great, but for me, I'm trying to get close to that studio scale look. Now, from personal observations, the kit is like between a light gray and a grayish blue. Not too blue, but not too gray. A nice even spot between the two. So I'll be using Mr. Colors 324 and then a little bit of Mr. Hobby's 73, just a little bit, and then mix the two together. So after a couple of minutes after letting the paint set and dry, the actual effect looks really nice. I love the pre-shadowing look around certain key areas. It looks great. Now, next challenging part is actually adding these additional areas with some light gray. Now there's no need for me to actually show you the painting process. I already did it. It's just basically the same gray I was using in a mid-tone fashion. And then I'd add additional highlights on certain panels on the saucer section too. Again, I can't do the full ECTECH texture, but if I can get some depth and feel in certain key areas, I'll be happy with that. So once again, I'll be hitting up more areas with that mid-gray like I did in the secondary hull, just to add some more depth and feel to it. And then around the sensor arrays around the side of the ship, I'll be hitting up with the exact same gray again, and then doing more additional detail to make those areas really pop out. Okay, so next up we're going to be painting the phaser array with Mr. Colors 229, and then we'll be hitting up the thrusters with the exact same color we use on the deflector disc, Mr. Hobby 7 brown. Alright, so the secondary hull and the actual saucer section is done. I'm loving all the surface detail, it's really popping out. Now comes the next fun part, is applying clear plastic behind the windows. So I'll be using the Zona clear case that I end up using for the Dremel as a form of windows behind it, and then hit those areas with a flat white to create a small amount of light diffusion. Now you're probably asking yourself, are you going to do the exact thing for the windows that you spend a lot of painting and staking time of hollowing out to add the exact same effect. Shocking enough, I have something that works very well. Thanks to my good friend Jason Spacedog on Instagram as well as YouTube. He actually was going to do something with his Voyager build, I believe maybe a year ago, and that's essentially using a clear resin or a UV resin behind the windows and then hitting up those particular areas with a UV light. And this works like magic. I didn't think this stuff was like legit, but it works. I wish I knew about this when I worked on the Enterprise E, but it's okay. That's why we're doing this. So we're just gonna apply a generous amount on each individual, not too much, not too little. Pop out any air pockets that pop in there and then hit it up with the UV light. Now I would recommend is using a toothpick for each individual window so you get a clean consistency, and then make sure you do a lot, and I mean a lot of double tapping between each individual resin window so that way they are properly curated. Now you're probably telling yourself that's a really daunting task, right? But I guarantee you all that hard work you put into it, it's gonna really pay off, because when we put in the LEDs, it's gonna look amazing. My LED upgrade has went up substantially from the 12 to 24. I think 24, maybe 32, I forget which. But I wanna make sure that each individual lights up. At the same time, I want there to be enough light bouncing upward and actually at the same time reflecting downward to light up the windows at the very bottom. Now I'm sure there's other light diffusion techniques that can be applied to that, but this is my method, I'm gonna stick with it. Next up, I need to drill out a hole for the front part of the navigational light and get that ready for some fiber optic lighting. Things on the saucer section by applying light blocking onto the navigation lights, I now need to get all the fiber optic wirings prepared and properly locked down before I work on the secondary hull. Now I'm going to use this fiber optic tube so that way all the wires can be funneled right through it, so I don't need a big chunk. I'm going to cut it in half and then use Evans & Line's blink LEDs. Now you notice I have two of them, so one part's going to go for the saucer section and one's going to go for the secondary hull. So I'll be doing like a light splitting effect. All right, the moment of truth. You know, it looks so cool. Oh, I'm smiling ear to ear. This is so cool. My plan on building this kit was to make sure that this guy looks amazing under normal lighting, right? In dark, it looks great, but having this in your office, in your room, whatever you want to place it, you want to make sure this guy shines and looks absolutely amazing. So I'm happy how the saucer section is going to look, and I'm very thrilled and work on the secondary hull after that's said and done. Now we have reached the final chapter of this build, and that's going to be work on the warp nacelles. There are some concerning parts in this, but I'll get into addressing that as I go forth. So what are we going to be doing for this project? First and foremost, we already got the navigational lights already prepared with the fiber optic wiring, so we're good with that. Next up, we have the areas already drilled out for the thrusters, so one part's gonna be silver, one part isn't, so that's gonna be just fine. We've already done a beautiful job of actually painstakingly painting the warp grills with Mr. Hobby 69, and now we're gonna talk about what we're gonna do for cement setter. Now this part is gonna be crucial because each part of this nacelle isn't properly molded. There's a lot of light imperfections around the front part of the warp nacelles as well as the back. So if you put a bright LED behind that, there's going to be noticeable like light bleeding. Now may I introduce to you probably the most exciting part of this build, and this is the brand new light filament. Now this is something I'll be implementing on my Gundam builds in the future, but you can see how flexible, how bright, how beautiful this is going to look when it comes to actually putting in the warp nacelles. I was originally going to be using like a 6 LED light system, but it created too many unnecessary hotspots. So this method is the the way to go by using this beautifully bright LED light filament. So as you can see here, I'm going to put it in the mid part of a warp nacelle. Now, since it is relatively bright, I'm going to put some light blocking behind there so that way it doesn't overspill over the red LED that's going to sit in the very front of the Basar collectors. So the difference between the warp nacelles and the Basar collectors, each one has their own unique color temperature, a bright white versus a bright blue. Have those two intermingle between one another in a closed area, well, guess what? You're going to get purple. So creating a proper light blocking in there by using the actual epoxy mix that we use for the action base for this model kit, it's going to be really crucial to make this effect look really great. So the warp nacelles are literally halfway done. They just need to be topped off and painted, but everything is settled in, everything's ready to go. Now it comes down to assembling and installing the LEDs for the wing sections. Now I'll be using a 3mm bulb for the impulse engines that sit within the back of the warp nacelles, and then I'm going to position them in a way where it just creates enough lighting in there to illuminate the front and the back side of the thruster. Now from a test fit, on hindsight, it looks great. The only downside is there is noticeable light bleeding within the in part of the actual wing, which means when I turn this bad boy on, everything's going to bleed out. So guess what I'll end up having to use to create some kind of form of light blinking? That's right, you guessed it, we're going to end up using that epoxy putty that we use for the warp nacelle as well as the action base for this model kit to really create even more light blocking. Again, I would recommend you use gloves, but I was kind of on a crunch here because I had to go to work as I was working on this model kit, so please wear gloves. So all the electrical wiring is done. I did as much as I could for the light blocking. So we're going to do a test to see how the LED lights look under low and bright light. And man, can't tell you how happy I am how this looks. I dreamed and dread this part would become a problem down the road, but everything's looking great. Now we hit the next filing stage. This is now we're gonna hit it with additional primer, and then once we hit the primer prepare, we're gonna be doing tons of masking tape around the inner part of the warp grills. I added an additional detail around the back rim of the actual warp nacelle. This is something that it's a detail that's missing on this model kit. It's something that you would definitely see on the TV show, but at the same time, this added detail is great. So I ended up using some polystyrene pieces. Then once that's set in there, I'm gonna be hitting up with more gray primer so that way I can lock everything down and then finish it off with another top coat of paint. my dudes and dudettes, the warp nacelles are done and they look absolutely stellar. Can't be happy. I couldn't be even more happy with this. This is great. It looks great. The striping around the warp nacelles looks great. The two-tone colors looks great. Now comes the hard part, and that's locking everything down because we're literally at the home run stretch here. So the shuttle bay, I'm not going to do anything too crazy. I'm just going to glue it into place because it's not going to be open. But my friend Kenny wanted to add an additional detail to the very front of the ship, and he wanted the torpedo bays to be lighting up red. Me personally, I don't like it. It kind of gives like a devilish, like creepy, evil smile, but this kit's not for me, it's for him. So who knows, down the road, if I build another Voyager, I won't have it with red lights. They are bright, so I need to do some more light blocking around there, but once I get that done, it's now time to install the deflector dish, and once it's properly lined up, it looks great. However, I did notice that there was a substantial amount of light bleeding behind the shuttle bay area. Now, it's not the door itself, it's the area in which it circumferences the door, right? There's noticeable light bleeding in the very back, and that could be problematic when you put in these very bright LED light strips in there when it's fully illuminated. So we're going to try our best to help reduce this by using our good old friend Mr. Magic, or our Magical Sculpt, to create more light blocking. Once again, I highly advise you guys to wear gloves because I didn't wear in the last part of this video, and just pack that stuff in there. And after that, you should be set to go. No light bleeding, no complications, everything is a-okay. And then after that, you should be able to get ready to install the final LEDs for this model kit. Now for this one, I'll be using Evans Design's 12 LED lights, or 12 bright LED lights for the secondary hull. And then everything else is just basically connecting everything together. And after that, your maiden voyage has come to an end. Okay, so just for clarification, the navigational light that sits in the bottom as well as the two that sit in the back will be interconnected to the blinking LED light that sits inside the saucer section, connected to the fiber optic tubing that is connected between the two. That way, everything should be good to go. Alright my dudes and dudettes, as this video is wrapping up, I want to share with you guys my thoughts and impressions on this wonderful 1/648 scale USS Voyager. Now, I've been a bit hesitant on working on this kit. I've had it in my backlog for a long time, and I think it's a long overdue to try something different. You know, I'll eventually get back to doing Gunpla content, but I want something that was like a big distraction for me, what I was experiencing the last 3 months. So this kit satisfied that itch. It got me through some tough times, and now I'm gonna take this opportunity to tell you about the pros and cons on the USS Voyager. So let's get into it. So when it comes to the design philosophy of designing a starship, you usually have like two traditional designs. The saucer section, slightly elongated secondary hull, and then you have the warp nacelles along with the long pylons. This design takes a drastic design departure from the traditional sense and tries something completely different. Now, some would argue change is bad, but at the same time, for something like this bold, it's actually surprisingly good because this design aesthetic would eventually be incorporated in other starships in the lineage, especially the one of my personal favorite, the USS Enterprise E, the Sovereign class. And with Voyager's architecture and its influences on other Federation starships in the Star Trek lineage, they've taken that traditional sense and flipped it over backwards and forwards and try something drastically different. Before I get into the whole nitty-gritty of the goods and the bads in this kit, I need to really take a step back and just tell you how much I truly appreciated working on this model kit. Yes, I did build this in a sense to celebrate the 30th anniversary for Star Trek Voyager, but there's two important meanings why I worked on this. Number one, I always like a challenge. I like to really push myself to the next level as a content creator as well as a builder, hence the reason why I'm trying a new video format, which I do hope you guys like. But most importantly, when I work on projects like this, I want to just get better and better. Painting, planning, restructuring the way how I do my painting techniques, how do I do a better job of hiding seam lines, or working with different forms of LEDs. These kits are like the bridging gap for me to get better at making content as well as making better professional builds for future clients. But the number one reason why I worked on this kit was because of my closest friend. This build isn't for me. Like I said, it's celebrating the 30th anniversary of Star Trek, but this project is going to a near dear friend of mine. And I apologize if I'm saying this out loud, but you already know who you are. I'm just gonna say your name anyway. His name is Kenny White. And I've known this man for a very, very long time. I have known this man for close to, it's gonna be 17 years now. Back in the early days when Xbox 360 was like relatively a thing when it came to playing games online for competitive needs or just reaching out to a completely different stranger. Kenny is a wonderful man and he's a great friend, and we have a lot of things in common. We love anime, we love movies, sci-fi, anything that is scientific. We love talking about that when we play games together. But the one thing that we always kept coming back is Star Trek Voyager. Now I have my reasons why I love Voyager, but he loves it because it was Star Trek has this great identity of escapism, but at the same time, a sense of hope for what one would see in the near future and what's to come in the future, whether it's technology, personal beliefs, religion, scientific new discoveries. It's always a great talking piece between one person to another, and me and him have always had that great chemistry with one another. And I told him one day, Kenny, I'm gonna build you something, but I don't think I have the skill set. I don't have the skill set, but I promise you, I will buy this model and I will build it for you, and I hope to get it out to you soon. That was literally 5 years ago. I know, it's kind of cringy, right? But at least I got the project done. I had fun, and I truly hope you enjoy this wonderful piece of art. So thank you for having me work on this project for you. So let's talk about the goods and bads in this model kit. First off, seam lines. Seam lines are probably by far the most stressful part in this kit. Underneath the secondary hull, even spots around the nacelles. And noticeably, there are some areas when it becomes to try to block light blocking around the saucer section. That becomes a headache upon itself, because when you get everything beautifully lit up, I mean, the light setup I have in here is kind of like blowing it out, but when this looks great in total darkness, everything looks great. The way how the windows are lit up, the way how the nacelles are glowing, the navigation lights are blinking, everything looks incredible. But then you start to notice the little details. You start to notice that I missed a spot there. That needs light blocking. That needs to be repaired. That seam line wasn't properly done. I need to sand that down. I had to repaint this. One would think the stressful part is putting in the LEDs. Been doing it for like 5 years plus. It's fun. It's not that hard. Prepping, knowing what colors work, knowing what products you need to do to hide seam lines, knowing what design philosophy you want to go to make this close to a studio scale like look is the stressful part for it. And for me personally, it was the most stressful part. I can't tell you how many references I went through looking at studio scale, movie scale, 3D model scales, and even like from other builders. I try my best to stay away from other people's interpretation how they paint Voyager, because some people's viewpoint is drastically different. Some see a gray, some like a grayish blue, others see it like a 5-tone gray. I kind of went with more what I saw from the TV show and based it off of that, incorporated onto this model kit, and I thought I did a pretty good job. And then I think, I don't know, I think the last stressful part on this project was the photo etching pieces. They're not hard to put on. They're very easy to apply, but you kind of have to know what goes where. Orange Strawberry does a wonderful job giving you a brief description how you apply their product onto it. But what if there's other competitors out there? What if they have a different design philosophies on how you apply the photo etchings onto this model kit? Some of it might work, others might fail. So you have to know what works for you, what's your comfort level, what parts you want to shave down, which parts you want to cover over. That philosophy is very similar to when it comes to putting LEDs. You don't want to have anything that incorporates this beautiful glow around the warp nacelles and have random hotspots. You need something that has a nice clean glow effect. That's why I use the LED light strips. Same thing with the deflector dish. Definitely see the design philosophy around the deflector dish. I like that aesthetic, and the add little bonus of adding those little rivet lines inside the deflectors. Oh, it's such a wonderful bonus. It's by all means, you do not need to do that. But for me, the someone that just loves detail, I like this kit. It's really cool. All this little detail around the sensor array, as well as the top part, and as well as the back. It's a detail that you don't see on any other starship. Even with the current lineage of starships now, it's drastically different. And man, despite all the frustrating parts in this kit, it was still a treat to build. I want to build more. They're fun, they're therapeutic, they're exciting, they're challenging. But I need to get back to building robots. Those are fun too. Now, at the end of the day, who is this kit really designed for? It's really designed for anyone, but this is a level 4 Rebel kit, which means it's really designed for those who have a key understanding of how to work with model kits. Now, what I mean by that is people that are comfortable cutting into plastic, learn how to modify areas, know how to do proper sanding, seam line blocking, light blocking, LEDs, the list goes on. It's really designed for people that are very experienced builders. Now, you can still get a sense of enjoyment if you just do a straight up build, but it's going to look kind of hollow, if that makes any sense. It's going to be build, right? But you want to go that extra step. You want to put all the bells and whistles in it, right? You want to really have this be a showpiece in your house or in your apartment or wherever you put it in, like in my man cave, you know, you want this to be a showpiece. There are two alternatives for you if this is not comfortable for you. There's the one from Bandai. Unfortunately, that particular one's out of print. So if you're okay spending $500, something that's already pre-painted, very simple LEDs, but bright enough to make it look really amazing, and already pre-painted pieces, go with that one. If you want something that is around the same size as the Bandai one, that doesn't have LEDs, but you are very comfortable putting LEDs with doing very minimum seam line blocking and light blocking, get the round 2 one. This design is beautiful. This mold is good, but it has its flaws. It's like close to a decade old, and it needs a much needed refresh, in my opinion. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, but with a refresh, they can add the detail that's missing on top of the saucer section, as well as the back part of the warp nacelles. The windows can be slightly retooled to the point where they don't cause any issues of doing any kind of cutting into them, as well as a little hints on where the navigation lights need to be. It's a small little gripe, but this kit definitely needs a much needed update. But overall, it's a fantastic kit, and I would say with anyone that wants a challenge, build it. Me personally, I loved it. So with that being said, seriously guys, thank you so much for chilling with me on this journey. I know it's not something that you guys would be interested in, but I like to change things up on this channel. Change is good, and especially what I've been going through in the last 3 months, you kind of have to adapt with the changes or you just roll with it. And for me, you know, I want to get back to building robots. So with that being said, thank you dudes and dudettes for watching this video. Don't let me sound like a weird YouTuber, but guys, smash that like button, share this video with your friends and family, and please, by all means, stay true to yourself, enjoy building Gunpla, and I will see you dudes and dudettes on the next build. Later. Oh God, of course. Yeah, and we're going back to building robots. Okay, we're going back to building robots. I'm sorry. Yeah, robots. Virtual on, please join me. It's gonna be fun. Okay, I'll see you guys later. Bye. I don't know why I didn't put that in there. Jesus Christ. Atreus, what's that ship called?
Boy.
That's my boy. Good job. Good job. Yay. Yay.